Hi, I'm Margaret Hvatum. I have common variable immune deficiency, and I was not diagnosed until about 6 years ago. I remember thinking as a child and as a young adult, boy, I sure am glad that doctors discovered antibiotics, because if they hadn't, I can't imagine that I would still be here. I was always a sickly child. I had every possible childhood illness that you could ever imagine. Some of them I had more than once. I remember having chicken pox and then having shingles as a 20-year-old, and then having shingles again as a 30-year-old, and then having shingles again as a 40-year-old. I got to know a lot of the ER staff and their families' lives because I was such a frequent visitor to the hospital. I got diagnosed with asthma, sinus infections. I had ear tubes put in as an adult. It was really awful. And no doctor ever really thought of any underlying cause for having so many illnesses that required so frequent antibiotic treatment. Eventually I got diagnosed with COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, because my lungs were in such bad shape. I was on prednisone very regularly because I would get a sinus infection, it would turn into bronchitis, and then I would start to wheeze, and I would need to be admitted to the hospital and be on oxygen and be on prednisone and IV solumedrol so that I could breathe again. I asked the doctors whether the problems I was having with my vision had any effect with were perhaps caused by the treatments I was getting, and they said no, there was no relationship between getting prednisone and having visual disturbances. So I ended up doing some research on my own and discovered that in fact prednisone could and does raise the blood sugar levels, which led me to going to visit an endocrinologist who diagnosed me with type 2 diabetes, which was in fact probably brought on by being on prednisone so many times for the asthma. And in the course of doing the workups on me, he discovered, in fact, that I had very much reduced levels of gamma globulin. And he furnished that information. This was Dr. Norman Fishman, doctor at St. Luke's Hospital in St. Louis. He's really the one, even though he's an endocrinologist, who diagnosed my immune system issues. I was then referred to an immunologist who did the follow-up testing and determined that in fact I wasn't making antibodies to pretty much anything. He gave me some immunizations, and the immunizations showed that I didn't create antibodies to the immunizations, and I was diagnosed with CVID, and then I began immune globulin treatment and stopped being sick all of the time with the increased health. It was just amazing not to have to be in the hospital 4 or 5 times a year, to actually maybe get 1 or 2 colds a year and be healthy. What a difference in my life that has been. So in 1995, when I was living in Boston, which I supposed to be wonderful medical treatment in Boston and wonderful diagnosticians, but I certainly didn't experience that. I was in the hospital on a regular basis with infections and was not diagnosed in 95. I was not diagnosed till about 2005 with CVID. So as a way of coping with being sick all of the time, I decided that I would at least get physically fit. And so I decided that even though I was on multiple medications for my difficulties with asthma, that I would start a fitness regimen. And I began to walk, and at the time I was so sick that I couldn't even walk across a Walgreens to pick up my prescriptions without resting. So I decided that that really had to change, and I needed to do something about that. So I began walking, and walking led to walking interspersed with running, and over the course of the summer of 1995, in between hospitalizations, I was able to walk enough that I could sign up for a race. I think my first race was something like an 8-kilometer race, which I thought was a 5-kilometer race. So I was expecting the finish line to show up, and it wasn't there, which was really disappointing. But I did manage to finish the race. I was the very last finisher of that race, and I was really proud to finish. And, you know, getting some exercise really helped me to feel better. Even though I was sick all of the time, at least exercising made a difference. So I decided that in between illnesses and in between hospitalizations, I was going to keep walking and running. I ended up finding a job in St. Louis and moving to St. Louis and finding other doctors, which led to my eventual diagnosis of CVID. But when I moved to St. Louis, I joined the St. Louis Track Club and began participating in events there, 5K races and eventually 10K races. And I wasn't the last person to finish. I was started to have some decent times, at least for me. I liked getting finisher's ribbons. I liked feeling that I was in some way in control of my life, because I could control how fast I walked or ran. I could control how much I exercised. I had no control over getting sick all of the time, but at least I had control over my physical activities. So the 5K races turned into 10K races, and then I began to wonder, you know, I wonder if I could run a half marathon. And once I started to think about that, I really had to do it. So my first half marathon, I think it was in about the year 2000, and it was hard. It took a really long time. I think it may have taken me 3 hours before I finished, but I finished. And that led to me thinking, well, maybe I could run another one faster. So I did. The next year I did the St. Louis Half Marathon again and finished it faster. And then I thought, well, maybe if I train more, I could finish faster. That led to other half marathons, and after I'd done a number of half marathons, I began to wonder if I could do a full marathon. So I set myself as the goal before I turned 50 that I would run a marathon. And I trained for and ran the Chicago marathon in the year 2005, which is actually about the year I got diagnosed with CVID. Finished the Chicago marathon. I did it in under 6 hours, which made me really proud. And then I thought, well, maybe I could do a marathon faster. Once I started on IVIG treatment, I started to have a lot more time for training and for running, because I wasn't in the hospital 5 or 6 times a year. I was in the hospital maybe once a year, and then as I had more IVIG treatments, finally I was not in the hospital at all, but I'd be on antibiotics maybe once or twice a year, and so that led me more time for marathoning, and that led me towards finishing more marathons. I ran the Boston Marathon a couple of years ago. I've completed now 18 marathons. I set myself the goal to qualify for the 50 Marathons in 50 States Club, which I completed last year. You have to do 10 marathons in 10 different states to qualify, and I qualified as a member. I've now done 13 states, and I've done a number of international marathons as well. And so this year I set myself the goal to become a marathon maniac, which meant that I needed to finish 2 marathons within a 16-day period of time. And so in May I did the Cleveland Marathon on a Sunday, The next Saturday I did the Gothenburg half marathon, and the Saturday after that I finished the Stockholm marathon in Stockholm, Sweden, which meant I did 2 marathons in 14 days. And I have to say that running has kept me sane, and I think made me so much healthier than I was before I was running. Because I started running before I ever got the diagnosis of CVID. Had I not done that, I don't think I would have been able to stand being sick as much as I was, or being having to traipse around to so many doctors and have so many doctors say, well, there's nothing inherently wrong with you, just, you know, take this round of antibiotics and come back and see me and whenever. I think that running or exercising is important for anybody that's facing a difficult medical situation, because it gives you the sense of control. You have to be in control of your own life in some area. Maybe you can't control it medically, but you can control how much exercise you get. And by doing that, I also gain control of my type 2 diabetes, because I'm no longer on insulin. I'm diet and exercise controlled. And yeah, that's a pretty strict diet, and that's a lot more exercise than probably most people would want. But I think it's psychologically so important to feel that you are in control of your destiny. You can control your blood sugar. You can decide how much to eat, and you can decide how much to exercise, and it makes a difference. So I think that I'm in a much better place in my life than I ever would have been had I not gained that sense of control through the exercise program that I started. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have had the stomach to keep going around to doctor after doctor after doctor and saying, you know, I don't think it's normal to be sick 9 or 10 times a year. I don't think it's normal to have to be in the hospital that often. I don't think that's normal, and there's got to be something wrong, and being told time after time, oh no, there's nothing wrong with you, except maybe you need to see a shrink. I don't think I needed to see a shrink. I think I needed to get a proper diagnosis. And while working on getting that diagnosis, and afterwards as well, I needed to gain a sense of control in my life, which I've gotten through running and exercise. And not everybody wants to run, but I think no matter what you do in terms of moving your body, it will help. So move your body. It'll make a difference. It'll help you a lot. Hi, this is Margaret Hvatum again. I wanted to reappear on the same video in my running gear, which I'm really proud of. Having done now 18 marathons since my diagnosis and treatment for common variable immune deficiency. And this particular outfit, the top is from a rock and roll marathon in San Antonio, Texas. Rock and roll marathons are really fun to run because they have a band about every mile or so, which is a great distraction from the pain of running. It makes it a lot more fun. And my Boston Marathon, I hope this is in the picture, from 2009 outfit, which I did the Boston Marathon in 2009, and I'm really proud of that. And while at the Immune Deficiency Conference in Arizona, my kids and I got up at 5 in the morning and we hiked up Saddleback Mountain and back down Saddleback Mountain successfully. We brought a lot of water, and it's just really great to have an illness that's correctly treated so that I can enjoy life and physical activities. So I hope that all of you seeing this will realize that with proper treatment, you too can enjoy life, you can get fit, and you can do really fun things such as climbing Saddleback Mountain. And we finished before it got up to 100 degrees. Thank you.